You'll stop thinking about them the day you become someone your old mind can no longer recognize. If they're always on your mind, without saying a single word, it means something. It means more than just missing someone. It means more than heartbreak or a few good memories. My friend, this silence, this heavy silence, they didn't create it, you did. And it's time we stop lying to ourselves about what that really means. You're not weak for thinking about them. You're not broken for wondering if they ever think about you too. But if their name keeps echoing in your mind, and you haven't heard a single word from them in days, weeks, maybe even months, it's not just about them anymore. It's about you. Hey folks, imagine this. You're carrying a backpack, heavy as hell. You've been walking with it for so long, you forgot it was even there. And inside that backpack, it's not love. It's not them. It's versions of yourself. Doubt, insecurity, hope, regret, all wrapped in memories of someone who stopped showing up. You're not carrying them. You're carrying who you thought you had to be when they were around. That's the weight. That's what's keeping them in your mind. See, most people think if someone is always on your mind, it means you're still in love. But that's the biggest lie you've been sold. Sometimes their memory lingers not because they were right for you, but because they triggered something you never finished inside yourself. You were hoping they'd come back and fix it, but that's not their job. That's yours. It's like playing a song that never reaches the chorus, just keeps looping the same verse over and over again. That's what your brain does when something feels unfinished. That's why you keep thinking about them. Not because they're special, but because your subconscious still sees that chapter as open. But let me ask you something real, something raw. If they're not reaching out, why are you still giving them space in your head? You think your thoughts are innocent, but those thoughts are building a cage. Every time you replay a memory, every time you stalk their social, every time you wonder, what if? You tighten the lock on the very door you're trying to escape from. But here's what no one tells you. Thinking about someone doesn't mean they still belong in your life. It means you haven't reclaimed your identity from the version of you that relied on their presence. They may be gone, but if they still live rent-free in your head, it's because you're the landlord that won't kick them out. And yes, sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it makes you feel weak, confused, maybe even angry. That's okay. That's part of growth. Because here's the truth. If they're always on your mind, without saying a word, it's not a message from them. It's a message from your mind, begging you to take back control. Look, my friends, I'm not saying forget them. I'm saying free yourself from needing them, because what you're really craving isn't their attention. It's your own evolution. You want peace, then earn it. You want clarity, then face it. You want strength, then build it. And you don't need a reply, a closure text, or a breadcrumb message to do any of that. You just need to decide that this is the day you stop waiting and start becoming. So here's what I want you to write in the comments if you're ready to shift your mindset right now. I reclaim my mind. Drop it below. Show it to the world. Show it to yourself. And if this hit home, if this gave you a little push, smash that like button and make sure you're subscribed. This isn't just content, it's a movement. Stay with me, because what comes next will change how you see everything. Number 1. Silence doesn't erase energy, it exposes it. You don't need words to feel someone. Their absence speaks volumes, and sometimes silence screams louder than love ever did. There's a reason they still show up in your thoughts, even though they haven't said a word. No text, no call, no "I miss you." And yet, there they are, lingering in your mind like smoke in a room long after the fire's gone. You tell yourself it's nothing, that you're just overthinking, that it'll fade. But it doesn't. Why? Because silence doesn't erase energy, it exposes it. Imagine walking into a room that looks clean, everything in its place, not a sound. But suddenly you catch a scent, something subtle, almost hidden. It's not loud, but it's there. That's what energy is like. You don't always see it, but you feel it. And the energy they left behind, it still exists in your system, in your nervous system, in your memory, in your body's emotional blueprint. That's why even in their silence, you can still hear them. Not through words, but through the tension in your chest, the tightness in your jaw, the way your mind drifts when the world goes quiet. And now your mind's asking questions that don't have answers. Do they still think about me? Was it all real? Did I matter at all? You want peace, but your mind keeps chasing meaning. It keeps trying to decode silence like it's a language. And here's the thing, it is. Silence is a message, but it's not their message, it's yours. It's your soul's way of saying, there's still something you haven't faced. You see, most people think the pain is about them being gone. But the pain doesn't come from their silence. The pain comes from your confusion about it, from the unanswered questions, from the way they left things open-ended. But here's the brutal truth, my friend. Not everyone who goes silent is confused. Some people go silent because they've already said everything they needed to say. Their silence isn't a pause, it's a period. You're still looking for punctuation in a sentence they already ended. That's why it hurts. That's why they're still in your thoughts. Because you're still waiting for a new chapter with someone who closed the book. But let's break the lie that silence equals hope. It doesn't. Silence equals space. And space is not always an invitation. It's sometimes a consequence. They didn't leave you hanging. You kept hanging on. And I say that with all the compassion in the world, but also with all the truth you need. Because the moment you accept that silence isn't rejection, it's reflection, that's when you stop chasing it. Still, I get it. It's hard. You're not crazy for feeling this way. You're not weak for still thinking about them. You're human. And part of being human is craving connection, even with those who no longer want to be connected to you. It takes courage to sit in that silence and not use it as a reason to break down, but as a reason to rebuild. Because here's the twist no one tells you. The silence you hate is the same silence that will grow you if you let it. So ask yourself this. What is their silence trying to teach you about yourself? Is it patience? Is it self-respect? Is it emotional self-control? Is it the art of letting go? Because until you stop viewing silence as punishment and start seeing it as a lesson, you'll always stay stuck in mental limbo, trapped between what you wanted and what reality delivered. You deserve better than that. You deserve clarity. You deserve peace. But no one's going to give it to you. Not them. Not closure. Not another conversation. You have to build that peace. One choice at a time. One thought at a time. And the first thought is this. I release what no longer speaks to me. Write that in the comments if you're ready to move forward. I release what no longer speaks to me. Don't just type it. Own it. Show yourself. Show the world around you that you're no longer waiting on a message that's not coming. You are the message. Number 2, You're not missing them. You're missing who you were around them. Sometimes we don't miss the person. We miss the person we became when we were with them. It's a lie we've all been sold, that if you keep thinking about someone, it must mean they're your soulmate, that they were the one, that somehow the universe is whispering through your thoughts, telling you they were meant to come back. But let's stop that noise right here, my friends. Let's get real. You're not missing them. You're missing you, the version of you that came alive when they were around, the spark you felt, the energy, the hunger to become more. That's what you're really grieving. See, people aren't always anchors. Sometimes they're mirrors. And when the mirror walks away, what you really lose is the reflection you fell in love with, the image of yourself that you saw when they looked at you like you mattered. That's why it still hits you so hard. That's why they're still in your thoughts. Not because they're special, but because you were. Think back to who you were when they were in your life. You were focused, you were consistent, you had something to prove, not to them, but to yourself. Maybe you hit the gym harder. Maybe you were waking up earlier, planning your future, visualizing your next move. And now, that drive feels like a ghost. Because when they left, they didn't just walk away with your memories. They walked away with your momentum. And now you're stuck wondering if that version of you only existed because of them. Let's break that lie right now. They didn't create that version of you. You did. They just gave you a reason to tap into it. They were the spark, yes, but you were the fuel. And if you created that fire once, you can create it again. But not if you keep telling yourself it was them that made you powerful. It wasn't. It was you stepping up to meet a moment. And just because that moment is over doesn't mean the man or woman you became has to vanish with it. Here's what makes it difficult, though. Our brains are wired to crave consistency. So when someone enters your life and activates growth, your mind links them with progress. It says, "They made me better," when really what happened was you allowed yourself to evolve because of the environment you were in. But growth is not a relationship benefit. It's a personal decision. And now that they're gone, you have to ask the question most people avoid. Am I willing to keep growing without being watched? That's what separates the average from the unstoppable. Most people grow when there's applause, when there's someone to impress, when there's someone watching the climb. But the real transformation, that happens in the dark, in silence, when no one's checking up, when no one's clapping. That's when you find out who you really are. That's when you find out if the progress was real or just performance. Let's not lie to ourselves, though. It hurts. It hurts when the person who made you feel seen no longer sees you, when the person who once asked how your day was now doesn't even know what city you're in. That sting, it's real. And you're not weak for feeling it. You're human. But you're also powerful. You just forgot how to be without their gaze reflecting it back at you. So let me ask you this. If you were becoming someone you admired when they were around, why did you stop becoming that person just because they left? Why let their absence rob you of your own potential? That's not heartbreak. That's sabotage. That's giving away your power because someone else took away their presence. You were never meant to depend on them to become great. You were meant to realize through them that greatness was already inside you. Their presence just pulled it to the surface. Their absence now, it's just the test to see if you can still be that person without applause, without validation, without a witness. And you can. You absolutely can. But only if you stop chasing the memory of who you were around them and start chasing the future version of who you're meant to become without them. Write this in the comments if you're ready to stop looking back and start building forward. I choose to grow without them. Show it to yourself. Show it to the world. Show it to the version of you that's still stuck in yesterday. Number 3. The mind repeats what feels unfinished. It's not love that keeps them alive in your thoughts. It's the part of you that still feels unfinished every time their name comes to mind. Let's tell the truth, folks. The real reason they keep showing up in your mind, over and over again, without a single word from them, isn't because of some magical soul connection. It's because your story with them feels like it never ended right. It's the mental equivalent of a door left cracked open in a storm. You know you should close it, but a part of you keeps wondering if they'll walk back through it. And so your mind loops, replays, rewinds. Because the human mind doesn't crave peace as much as it craves completion. You've probably said it to yourself before, I just want closure. But what you really want is for the story to make sense. For all the effort, all the emotion, all the late-night talks and morning texts to have meant something. That's the itch you can't scratch. That's the loop you can't break. Because they left, and they didn't explain. Or maybe they did, but it didn't feel like the full truth. And now your brain is stuck in detective mode, trying to solve a case that's already been closed. But here's where it gets real, my friends. Not every story gets a clean ending. Not every connection ends with understanding. Some just stop, abruptly, without warning. And that's the kind of silence that drives people insane. Not the absence of love, but the absence of resolution. The kind that makes you wake up at 3 a.m. with their names still echoing in your chest. Not because you miss them, but because your soul still thinks there's something left to finish. And here's the deeper truth. Most of us weren't taught how to close a chapter ourselves. We were taught to wait for the text, the call, the apology, the explanation. We sit around hoping the person who hurt us will be the one to help us heal. But the brutal reality is, the one who caused the wound is rarely the one who's going to stitch it up. That's your job. That's your inner work. That's your responsibility. But it's not easy, right? Because they didn't just take memories with them when they left. They took your sense of certainty, your sense of direction. You had a picture in your head of how things were supposed to play out. Maybe not forever, but at least for a little longer. And when that image shattered, you didn't just lose them. You lost the future you thought you were building. That's what your mind is clinging to. That unfinished dream. That emotional blueprint with no one left to help build it. So now every time you think about them, it's like you're revisiting the construction site of a house that never got built. Still seeing the frame, still imagining the rooms, still wondering what it would have looked like if things hadn't collapsed. But my friend, at some point, you have to stop walking through that empty house in your mind and realize it's not your home anymore. It's a memory, a metaphor, and you don't owe it anything. Let me hit you with something sharp but freeing. They don't have to finish the story. You do. They don't need to return. They don't need to explain. They don't need to come back and say, "You mattered." You need to look in the mirror and say it to yourself, because your value was never supposed to be proven by someone else's ability to stay. It was always something you were meant to know, regardless of who walked away. So let's break the lie right here. If they're always on your mind, it's not because you're weak. It's because your mind is looking for a conclusion that doesn't exist outside of you. The story doesn't end when they leave. The story ends when you decide to stop rereading the same page, hoping the words will change. You want freedom? Then you've got to write your own ending. You've got to give yourself closure, not by understanding them, but by understanding why you kept waiting for someone who already showed you what they were capable of. That's the shift. That's the power. So here's the affirmation, and I want you to write it in the comments. I close this chapter for me. Type it out. Say it out loud. Show the world you're no longer stuck in a story that refuses to move forward. And if this opened something inside you, press the like button, hit subscribe, and stay with me, because we're just getting warmed up. The next part is going to show you exactly how to untie your identity from their silence and reclaim the version of yourself that no longer needs their validation to feel complete. Keep walking with me. You're not done yet. Number 4. The mind repeats what feels unfinished. It's not love that keeps them alive in your thoughts. It's the part of you that still feels unfinished every time their name comes to mind. Let's tell the truth, folks. The real reason they keep showing up in your mind over and over again without a single word from them isn't because of some magical soul connection. It's because your story with them feels like it never ended right. It's the mental equivalent of a door left cracked open in a storm. You know you should close it, but a part of you keeps wondering if they'll walk back through it. And so your mind loops, replays, rewinds. Because the human mind doesn't crave peace as much as it craves completion. You've probably said it to yourself before, I just want closure. But what you really want is for the story to make sense, for all the effort, all the emotion, all the late-night talks and morning texts to have meant something. That's the itch you can't scratch. That's the loop you can't break. Because they left, and they didn't explain. Or maybe they did, but it didn't feel like the full truth. And now your brain is stuck in detective mode, trying to solve a case that's already been closed. But here's where it gets real, my friends. Not every story gets a clean ending. Not every connection ends with understanding. Some just stop, abruptly, without warning. And that's the kind of silence that drives people insane. Not the absence of love, but the absence of resolution. The kind that makes you wake up at 3 a.m. with their name still echoing in your chest. Not because you miss them, but because your soul still thinks there's something left to finish. And here's the deeper truth. Most of us weren't taught how to close a chapter ourselves. We were taught to wait. Wait for the text, the call, the apology, the explanation. We sit around hoping the person who hurt us will be the one to help us heal. But the brutal reality is, the one who caused the wound is rarely the one who's going to stitch it up. That's your job. That's your inner work. That's your responsibility. But it's not easy, right? Because they didn't just take memories with them when they left. They took your sense of certainty, your sense of direction. You had a picture in your head of how things were supposed to play out. Maybe not forever, but at least for a little longer. And when that image shattered, you didn't just lose them. You lost the future you thought you were building. That's what your mind is clinging to, that unfinished dream, that emotional blueprint with no one left to help build it. So now, every time you think about them, it's like you're revisiting the construction site of a house that never got built. still seeing the frame, still imagining the rooms, still wondering what it would have looked like if things hadn't collapsed. But my friend, at some point, you have to stop walking through that empty house in your mind and realize it's not your home anymore. It's a memory, a metaphor, and you don't owe it anything. Let me hit you with something sharp but freeing. They don't have to finish the story. You do. They don't need to return. They don't need to explain. They don't need to come back and say, "You mattered." You need to look in the mirror and say it to yourself. Because your value was never supposed to be proven by someone else's ability to stay. It was always something you were meant to know, regardless of who walked away. So let's break the lie right here. If they're always on your mind, it's not because you're weak. It's because your mind is looking for a conclusion that doesn't exist outside of you. The story doesn't end when they leave. The story ends when you decide to stop rereading the same page, hoping the words will change. You want freedom. Then you've got to write your own ending. You've got to give yourself closure, not by understanding them, but by understanding why you kept waiting for someone who already showed you what they were capable of. That's the shift. That's the power. So here's the affirmation, and I want you to write it in the comments. I close this chapter for me. Type it out. Say it out loud. Show the world you're no longer stuck in a story that refuses to move forward. Number 5. You're still tied to their validation, not their presence. What keeps you thinking about them isn't love. It's the part of you that still believes you needed their eyes to feel seen. Let's cut through the noise, my friends. If they're still living in your head, day and night, and they haven't even bothered to speak a single word to you, it's not just about missing someone. It's about being tied to something deeper, not their presence, but the validation they once gave you. The way they looked at you when you felt powerful, the way they smiled when you were enough, the way their attention made you feel like you finally mattered. It wasn't love. It was a reflection. And now that the mirror's gone, you're standing there wondering if the image was ever real in the first place. It's a hard truth, I know. But you're not haunted by them. You're haunted by how you felt around them. And here's where it gets dangerous. When someone becomes your mirror, when their approval becomes your sense of self-worth, the silence doesn't just feel like distance, it feels like erasure. You start questioning your identity. Was I even that person? Did they see something real in me? Or was I just playing a role to keep their attention? And when they stopped watching, did that version of me disappear? It's wild, isn't it? One person goes silent, and suddenly your entire sense of value feels like it's on mute. That's not connection. That's dependency. That's a subconscious addiction to being seen, needed, desired. And when that supply is cut off, your brain starts panicking. You're not chasing them. You're chasing the feeling they gave you. You're chasing the identity you had when they were applauding you. That's why you keep checking their socials. That's why you imagine conversations that never happen. That's why they still pop into your thoughts like ghosts of a time when you felt validated. But here's the part no one teaches us. Validation that comes from outside is always rented. It's never owned. And rented worth? It can be revoked at any time. That's what happened. They left, and they took the spotlight with them. And now, you're in the dark, unsure of who you are when no one's clapping. But that silence, that's your training ground. That's the place where real confidence is born. Because the truth is, you were never supposed to borrow identity from someone else's eyes. You were supposed to build it from within. Let's go even deeper. You know that voice in your head that keeps asking, why don't they check in? Why aren't they reaching out? Why do I still care when they clearly don't? That voice isn't weakness. That voice is an echo of your unhealed self. The part of you that still thinks their attention would somehow fix the fracture. But it won't, because the wound isn't them leaving. It's you forgetting who you are without their validation. Listen, I'm not here to beat you up. I'm here to wake you up. You were powerful before they entered your life. You had light before they saw it. You had purpose before they applauded it. And you don't need their permission to shine again. You just need to stop outsourcing your sense of worth. Stop tying your value to someone who's not even checking if you're breathing. Their silence doesn't define you. Your decision does. So what do you do now? You build, you ground, you lead yourself. You create a version of you that no longer needs to be seen to feel real. Because here's the truth. When you start validating yourself, their silence becomes irrelevant. It's not rejection anymore. It's just redirection. You stop wondering if they'll come back and start wondering what you're about to become now that they're gone. Write this in the comments if you're done letting someone else's silence dictate your self-worth. I validate myself now. Say it like you mean it. Type it like it's a declaration, because that's what it is. You're not just reclaiming your thoughts, you're reclaiming your power. Number 6. They activated a fire. You forgot to keep it burning. Sometimes people come into our lives not to stay, but to ignite something we forgot we had the power to fuel. Let's get one thing straight, folks. They didn't create the fire in you, they sparked it. And that's a big difference. They didn't build your ambition, your passion, your glow-up. They just walked by with a match. You were the wood. You were the oxygen. You were the reason that fire even caught flame. But here's the real kicker. Once they walked away, you let that fire go cold. Not because it had to, but because deep down, you were hoping they'd come back and light it again. That's the lie you've been living in. You say you miss them, but what you really miss is the energy you had when they were around. The discipline, the purpose, the reason to wake up and do better. Back then, you were focused, sharper, hungrier. You weren't just drifting through the days. You were building, not for them, but because of what they represented. A possibility, a standard, a spark. And when they left, it felt like the plug got pulled from your power source. But let me ask you, was that power ever really theirs to begin with? Imagine a candle. It burns bright in a dark room. It warms everything around it. But once it's out, the room feels colder, doesn't it? More lifeless. That's what you've been feeling. Not because they were the flame, but because you stopped protecting the fire you were already carrying. And maybe that sounds poetic, but I'm not here to write poems. I'm here to hand you the truth. And the truth is, you got comfortable being lit by someone else. You liked the way they looked at you, the way they noticed your growth, the way they admired who you were becoming. And somewhere along the line, you started building for their gaze, not for your greatness. That's why it hurts now. Not because they're gone, but because without them watching, you forgot who you were trying to become. You forgot the goals, the grind, the mission. You stopped feeding the very fire that was changing your life. And now you're staring into the silence, hoping for a sign. But let me tell you, waiting for them to come back is like standing in a burned-out forest, waiting for a lightning strike. It might happen, but by then, you'll be too far gone to care. You've got to stop treating them like the source of your momentum. They were a moment, not your mission. The version of you that came alive when they showed up. That was real. That wasn't a trick. That wasn't fake. That was you, finally giving yourself permission to step up. And that permission is still there. But you've got to give it to yourself now, without their text, without their smile, without their belief in you. You know what's crazy? Sometimes we fight harder when someone else is watching. We train harder when someone's cheering. We push further when someone says, "I believe in you." But what about when no one's watching? What about when it's just you and the silence? Can you still push then? Can you still rise then? Can you still burn when no one's around to feel the heat? Because that's where power is born. Not in the moments when someone's beside you, but in the moments when no one is, and you still show up like they are. That's the test. That's the lesson. And if you pass that, you become dangerous. Not reckless, not toxic, powerful, because you'll no longer be moved by someone else's presence. You'll be moved by your own standard. So here's the shift. Stop chasing the spark and start becoming the fire. Stop waiting for someone to light you up and start burning from the inside out. Light your own damn match. Pour fuel on your focus. Throw gasoline on your discipline. Reignite the version of you that didn't need anyone's attention to keep growing. Drop this in the comments if you're ready to keep that fire alive, no matter who's watching. I am my own spark. Say it. Mean it. Prove it. Because you're not here to survive heartbreak. You're here to outgrow it. Number 7. Your mind is trying to learn, not linger. When a lesson hasn't been understood, the mind will keep repeating the moment until it is. Let's get brutally honest, folks. If they're still living rent-free in your head, showing up in your thoughts without a single message, no explanation, no apology, it's not because your heart is weak. It's not because you're still in love. It's because your mind is still in class. That's right. You're not stuck. You're studying, over and over again. And the problem isn't the memory. It's that your soul knows you haven't passed the test yet. You ever notice how some thoughts just show up without invitation? You're driving, you're working, you're in a good mood, and boom, they're there. A flash of their face, a moment, a laugh, a goodbye, and suddenly your stomach tightens. Why? Because your mind doesn't bring them up to torture you. It brings them up to teach you. It's trying to make sense of something that still doesn't make sense to you. And until you give it the lesson, it will keep hitting replay. But most people misread the signal. They think, if I can't stop thinking about them, I must still care. Nah. What's really happening is you haven't integrated the lesson. You haven't figured out what their presence and their silence was supposed to reveal. You keep flipping the emotional Rubik's Cube, hoping it'll land in alignment. But here's the truth. It won't align until you stop avoiding the core question. What did I need to learn from them? Let's break this down. When someone enters your life and shakes your emotional world, they don't just leave with their things. They leave with a piece of your understanding. They take away what you thought love was, what you thought safety felt like, what you thought the future might look like. And now you're trying to rebuild that picture from memory. But the pieces don't fit anymore. That confusion, that ache, that recurring thought of them when you least expect it, that's your mind begging for clarity. And let's be real, it's hard to admit you still think about someone who doesn't think about you. It messes with your pride, makes you question your worth. But here's the twist. Your thoughts aren't about them. They're about you trying to make peace with the gap they left behind. And that's where most people get stuck. They try to forget the person when what they really need to do is learn the lesson. Imagine getting stuck in traffic on the same street every day, but you never check the map for a new route. That's what your brain is doing. It keeps taking you down the same emotional path because you haven't rewired your direction yet. You're not broken, you're just looping, and loops don't stop with time. They stop with awareness. So ask yourself this: what part of me do I need to face every time they come to mind? Is it my lack of boundaries, my fear of abandonment, my need to be chosen? Is it the part of me that kept hoping they'd change, even when they kept showing me they wouldn't? That's the gold. That's the work. And once you do it, once you pull the lesson from the wreckage, the loop ends, not because you forget them, but because you outgrow the need to remember them. And hear me when I say this: you are not crazy for replaying what happened. You're intelligent, because pain is your teacher, regret is your syllabus, memory is your study material, and your breakthrough, that's the exam. That's when you stop being haunted by them and start being hardened by the growth. So here's what I want you to do. Don't run from the thoughts. Don't numb them with distractions or drown them in noise. Sit with them, feel them, decode them, and then write this in the comments: I'm ready to learn the lesson. Say it like you mean it. Say it like your next level depends on it, because it does. This isn't about getting them back. It's about getting your mind back, your peace, your clarity, your evolution. Number 8. You're holding on because you haven't transformed yet. You can't outgrow what still owns your identity. Let's go deep, my friends. Real deep. Because if they're still showing up in your thoughts, without a text, without a word, without a single ounce of effort from their side, it's not about what they're doing. It's about what you're not doing. You're holding on, not because they're unforgettable, not because they're your soulmate, but because the version of you that was attached to them still exists. And you haven't transformed enough to let go of that identity yet. Here's what most people don't understand. We don't just grieve people. We grieve the person we were when they were around. The version of you that smiled a little more, hoped a little harder, believed just enough to think, maybe this one's different. You're not stuck on them. You're stuck on who you were becoming when they were close. And that's what makes the silence so loud. Because now that they're gone, it's not just quiet. You feel like you disappeared with them. Think about it. You had momentum. You were evolving. You were stepping into something better. But that transformation, it wasn't rooted in discipline. It was rooted in them, in their validation, in their presence, in their attention. So the moment they pulled away, your growth went with them. And now you're sitting there wondering, why do I still think about them? Because your evolution was interrupted. You didn't finish the process. And your mind doesn't like unfinished business. But here's the brutal truth most people run from. If your growth depended on someone else, it wasn't growth, it was performance. And performance is fragile. It dies the moment the audience leaves the room. That's why you're stuck. Not because they were perfect, but because their presence gave you a reason to try. And now, without that reason, you feel empty. But that emptiness, that's your signal. That's not failure. That's your soul saying, it's time to build a better reason. And let's be real, it's easier to hold on than it is to evolve. Growth requires you to leave behind the version of yourself that needed their attention in the first place. And that hurts. Because even though that version of you was insecure, hopeful, and maybe even desperate, it was also a version of you that was hungry, that wanted to change, that was reaching for more. And now, instead of continuing that evolution, you're clinging to the ghost of who you were around them. But you can't move forward while dragging old identities behind you. You can't step into your future with your heart still living in a scene from the past. The person you were when they left, that version of you wasn't finished yet. And the thoughts you keep having about them, they're not a sign that you miss them. They're a sign that you miss the mission to become more, the mission to elevate, the mission to transform. So what do? You stop waiting. You stop wondering. You stop hoping they'll reach out and complete the chapter for you. Because they won't. That's not their job. That's yours. It's your responsibility to evolve so far beyond the version of yourself that needed them, that when you look back, you don't see pain. You see progress. You don't feel loss. You feel liberation. And I know it's not easy. It's not supposed to be. Transformation never is. It requires death. The death of the weak version of you. The death of the person who tied their worth to someone else's attention. The death of the identity that kept shrinking just to fit into someone else's story. You want to stop thinking about them, then become the version of you who doesn't need to. And if that hit you in the chest, then write this in the comments right now. I'm done performing. I'm becoming. Say it. Own it. Show the world around you. Show yourself. Because this is your turning point. This is where the real work begins. Not to get them back. Not to prove them wrong. But to prove yourself right. To show the person in the mirror that you don't need to be saved. You just needed to remember who you are. If this cracked something open in your soul, press that like button and subscribe. Because next, we're unlocking the truth about identity.